Hello, I'm Rick Dior, and that was a solo called Roy's Ruse. And it's from a Rich Thompson book called Modern Jazz Solos for Drum Set. And I'm doing a series on all these solos that I use with my students to work on these different styles of all the great jazz drummers. And to me, Roy Haynes is probably the greatest jazz drummer. He's my absolute favorite for a lot of different reasons. First of all, he's been around forever. He's still alive. I think he's 96 years old last time I checked, and he's still playing, which is a testament to great technique and health and genes and just, I don't know, blessings, whatever you want to call them. But just a genius drummer. He blazed the trail for so many folks. I think he pretty much influenced every single jazz drummer, modern jazz drummer, that you could name. Every time I hear someone who I love the way they play, new, a little older, you hear Roy in there. I mean, when I first heard Jeff Watts, I heard Roy in there. When I first heard Bill Stewart, I definitely heard a lot of Roy in there. Of course, Elvin, I think, was influenced a lot by Roy Haynes. Jack DeJohnette, definitely. I don't know about Tony Williams. He would never admit to it, but I think even he was probably influenced, especially the hi-hat work of Roy Haynes. Now, Roy Haynes was just so great at so many things. And he had his hip ensemble where they played a little bit of rock and funk and that stuff. But really, as far as jazz goes and phrasing, he is a complete individual. So he started out his career young, playing early bebop. Of course, he played with Charlie Parker and Monk and all these guys, and he played with so many folks. And really, second to maybe Philly Joe Jones, he's probably one of the most recorded jazz drummers that there is. Now, a master of the hi-hat. I once saw him do a concert at Alice Tully Hall in New York, and he came out front and played a solo on just a hi-hat, like a Papa Joe Jones thing. And it was just incredible how great he was. And I remember seeing him with Chick Corea, doing trio music, the music of Monk in New York, and he had a timpani, and I thought, that is so great. And he would use it during his solos and hit it every once in a while. Just a master of sounds. Of course, he liked gongs and all these different sounds. He played Paiste cymbals. Now, right here is pretty much the exact cymbal he played, not the cymbal he played. I think Chick Corea had that before. Unfortunately, he passed earlier this year. But this is a Paiste 602 medium light ride. So it's very, very similar to what he used on the record Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. So it's got that sound, no rivets, very dry. And, when I first heard that when I was a kid, I was like, what is that? Because I'd been listening to a lot of Miles and, Sonny Rollins and stuff like that, Hank Mobley. Then all of a sudden I heard that record. It's like, wow, this is so great and so clean and so different. And, I think his nickname was like Snap, Crackle, Pop because of the sound of his snare drum. Roy played a lot of short sounds, and then a lot of the long sounds he played were on the toms, So he'd play a lot of mixture of high to low. He had the widest tuning range of any drummer with the least amount of drums, I should say, that I ever heard. So he'd have this high snare drum, but a low bass drum, and like I said, a timpani, and his toms would be tuned a little bit on the low side. So that was beautiful, too, to hear that giant range, almost like a piano kind of range. And I get real excited when I talk about him because, like I said, every time I hear him play, I'm just like, even to this day. Now, he kept changing. The sound of his playing kept changing. If you listen to records that he did when he was in his 70s with Pat Metheny and John Scofield and things like that, it sounds a lot different. Now, I don't know if that's because of his age or just he had made a conscious decision to play like that. But to me, the best playing was with Chick Corea with those trio records. Now, Roy Haynes had has, I should say, I got to stop saying had. Most of the guys we've talked about, except for Al Foster, have passed away. but Roy's still with us. So he has a really wide cymbal pattern, like. You can almost drive a car through that. There's so much space. And also he used the hi-hat in really, like I said before, in really unique ways. So a lot of doubling with the bass drum instead of just 2 and 4. A lot of splashing, a lot of choking. Just a lot of little tricks. He had a lot of tricks. Now, he also used a lot of hemiolas, sort of like Tony Williams, where he played all over the bar line and across the bar line, and implying, 3/4 time when you were playing in 4, and those things. He didn't do a lot of the Elvin kind of wide 7s and 5s, those kinds of things. This was more like long phrases that he would play that would equal out. And of course, this worked great with Chick Corea's playing because he was the same way. Rhythmically, that guy was unbelievable. His comping on the piano, his sense of rhythm was, I think, the greatest of any jazz pianist ever. And he would do those same things. So those guys really kind of thought alike and played off each other in a great way. That's why they played throughout their whole lifetimes pretty much together, probably 50 years when you add it all up. Now, this solo is a pretty decent representation of his style. You'll see I'm playing a lot of straight eighth notes here, and also the 16ths at this tempo, which is 208, is the quarter note, goes by really, really fast. Also, you'll see a lot of these paradiddle-diddle stickings. That's a theme with all these jazz drummers. It's a common thing. So. Because they're easy to play fast and phrase like that. So if we start in the beginning, and by the way, I did play 8 bars a time up front, and I like to do it that way with my students so they can get into it. They're just not starting the solo. Some of these open hi-hats are written with a 0 or over them, or an O if you want to think of that. You just want to play those like this. So not too long. You want to cut it off when you hit that rim, that cross rim. And try to play these notes really, really wide. And then going on, these eighth notes, instead of playing them like this, I'm playing them more. So you don't want to play those too triplety. In fact, Mr. Thompson writes here, he wants them sort of like bebop eighths, not too triplety. So kind of avoid that. And that's Roy's sound. It's a little more open on that side. Now, a lot of these kinds of licks, like you see in the 4th stanza, that's a perfect example of him playing the hi-hat with the bass drum, which I really like because it adds a little top end to that sound. And of course, he did a lot of that rapping that a lot of these drummers, Jimmy Cobb, Philly Joe Jones, did. And that's one of my favorite kind of Roy licks where he plays that triplet hi-hat like this. So the triplet is, it's the last note of that triplet on the hi-hat. Did that all the time. Pretty much almost every solo he did that. So later on in this solo, it gets very, very technical. And I do keep my hi-hat going in a few spots, like the 3rd and 4th bar of the 2nd page. I keep it going. That's a really tricky thing there. So let's play that. So that's worth keeping your hi-hat going. And in fact, he has that written in for most of it. So I would keep it going, and I have my students do that too. Now, the trickiest part of the solo physically happens at 49. So you're going, I'll put on the metronome so you can hear it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those two stanzas from 49 are really, really demanding with your single stroke. So. And again, he did a lot of single strokes like that. Great technique, just amazing technique, really. And you see there, I'm adding some open hi-hats. I listened to the CD, and Mr. Thompson does that as well, because Roy did that. So what I'm talking about is the third stanza from the end, bar 2, where he's doing this. So as you progress with those eighth notes, you can open that hi-hat and lay into it more. That's not written like that, but, you know, I would definitely do it like that. All right, so that's the solo, and I went through it pretty fast because I think I'm probably going to run out of memory on my camera here like I usually do. I'll just play a little for you, but I would definitely suggest studying the hell out of Roy Haynes. There's so many great records. I'll list some here in the description. And also, there's a lot of video of him playing. That's one of the gifts. There's not a lot of video of some of these drummers like Philly Joe and even Tony. There's not too much of him. But there's a lot of Roy, and you really got to study him. His sound is unbelievable. And the thing is, there's not one Roy Haynes. There's like 4 iterations of Roy Haynes, from early on with Charlie Parker, playing very simple, straight ahead, you know, through that whole journey until you hear him with his own group, and then you hear him later, like I said, with Pat Metheny. You know, those are my favorite records. Question and Answer, that tune is amazing. So please check that out along with all the Chicorea stuff.